Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. Now, here's your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Hello and welcome to the program. My very special guest today is Arthur Cole. Arthur, are you with me?
I am, Michael.
Great. Let's begin this journey together. I'll ask you the very first question. What is poetry?
What is poetry, Michael? It's a very good question. Obviously, everybody has an individual perception of poetry. My perception is that it's basically writing words from the heart, and they also tell a story. And throughout the story, there's emotion, expressions, and obviously challenging issues on some accounts. But I run a poetry group on my Facebook, Arthur's Poems, and there's about 1,400 members on that. So I asked this question some weeks ago, what they thought poetry was, to see how different it was to my sort of theory on it. And I must say that some of the answers were quite challenging, really, and perhaps I can read some of them to you, what they think of it.
Yes, I'd like that.
One of the answers was, what is poetry? It was a deep feeling and understanding, tempered with humour and entertaining. That was one of them. Another one was what a poet is. A poet is an artist painting in words, which I thought was a nice definition.
It's very nice.
Yeah, and the one that I think applies to me as well is that the poem or the poetry is constructed in the brain and polished in the heart.
Oh wow, that's a nice one as well.
Yeah,
very nice.
And I can relate to that in relation to the poetry that I write. Obviously, another answer was personal feelings, thoughts, dreams, goals, hopes and desires, and the one that went with that was magical. So you've got a whole amalgam of what poetry is there, and that's of myself and certain other individuals who read poetry and write poetry.
What do you think the overall message is about poetry? What is the message that we're attempting to share with others?
Well, I think it all depends what type of poetry you write. I think all poets try to get to the heart of the reader. And I think that's one of the main things that I try to achieve. When I write a poem, whatever type of poem it is, I like to sort of hook the reader early on in the poem. And I think once you can hook them on that first couple of lines, they then want to read. It's like writing a book, chapters of a book. People say, I read the first chapter and I couldn't put it down as a real page turner. I think poetry is very similar to that. So say you write a 5-verse poem. Once the reader reads the first couple of lines, they say, well, I've got to finish this. And I think that's the structure of poetry.
Very nice, very nice. Now let's go back in your life. What was an early experience where you learned that poetry had power?
But to be truthful with you, Mike, I didn't do a lot of poetry when I was in school. And I was very, very lucky. I left school at 17. But from the age of 16 till when I finished in school, we had a new English literature teacher who came to the school, Mr. David John, his name was. Now, he was introduced by the headmaster in the morning, but he didn't come into the class till the afternoon, obviously. And when we saw him, he came in, he must have been in his early 20s, 24, 25 perhaps, long auburn hair, wearing denim jeans, cowboy boots, and a chamois jacket with the tassels on. All that he basically needed was a cowboy hat. And he was carrying a dance set record player, and he went to the front of the class, he put the record player down, and he started talking to us. And I thought he was an American. As soon as he started talking, he introduced himself, I thought, this gentleman is from America. But then he mentioned his name. My name is David John. He said, I was born and bred in Llynfi, which is a small Welsh mining village, not far from where I was born myself. And what it was, he'd finished his teacher training over here, and he'd gone to Canada, where he'd spent about 3 or 4 years teaching English. And then obviously he came back to our comprehensive school in Maesteg. So once he introduced himself, all he did was, he didn't have any books with him. He opened the record player up and he played this record. And it was the Universal Soldier, which was a song written by Buffy St. Marie, a Canadian singer. And it was introduced in 1964. And it's basically a war, anti-Vietnam War song, basically saying that soldiers all over the world are responsible for our wars, but through a third person, that type of thing. And he played this record, and he just threw it open to the class. You know, what's it about? What do you think of it? And he just hooked everybody. The song actually hooked us, and his demeanour hooked us as well. And from that day on, he totally changed the way English literature was taught in the school.
Wow. There must have been...
He went on, so he went on from there then, as the classes progressed, and he introduced us to the war poets, Wilfred Owen, Sassoon, and that type of stuff. And I loved that. However, I didn't write any poetry at that time, and then I only had him for about 9 months, and then I left school and I joined the Glamorgan Police. All right.
Wow.
So what happened then, obviously, what happened then, I spent my whole career, 30-odd years, in the police. I never read a poem. I never wrote a poem. And it wasn't until I retired in 1965, it was towards the end of the year, when it's 2015, going into 2016, that I read a poem on a coal mining site, and I read it, and I thought to myself, I'd like to write a poem, a coal mining poem, a poem related to coal mining. And I just opened my computer, and I knew what I wanted to write about. It was the Aberfan disaster in 1966, and I wrote the 5 verses. It didn't take me long. It took me about half an hour, and I put it on the coal mining site. And obviously, I had loads of sort of replies and comments about it. And then I started writing coal mining poetry. And I think that's when I realized the power of poetry could get to people, if you understand me. And then I just kept on writing. So I've been writing. I started writing when I was 66. I'm 71 now. So I've been writing constantly for 5 years.
Fascinating story. Share a poem for us, please.
I will do that, Michael. I'll read you the first poem that I wrote, which was Aberfan. I don't know whether any of the listeners can relate to Aberfan, but it was a horrendous disaster which occurred at 9:15 a.m. on Friday, the 21st of October, 1966, when a colliery spoil tip collapsed into many homes and the Pant Glas Junior School in Aberfan, killing 116 children and 28 adults. And obviously it resounded around the world, this disaster did. So this is the poem that I dedicated to the children. Aberfan. Slag and slurry, the devil incarnate, robbed a village of lives and didn't abate. On that early morn, the sun fell from the sky. A giant black shadow drowned their small cries. Teachers and children fighting for air, the slag and the slurry laid the school bare, completely covered by the river of black. Many souls lost. If we could only go back. The village would come with all haste and speed, digging with hands, miners taking the lead, mothers wailing, where is my child? The black stuff still sliding, a torrent so vile. The number it took was 144. If only God had allowed a few hours more. Half term it would be later that day. Souls that we lost would have been on their way. The survivors, they numbered 145, sad and heartbroken, however alive. God bless you all. Please rest in peace. Never forgotten. Well, love will not cease. And, that's the end of that book.
Wow. What did it feel like to post it for the very first time?
Well, I didn't know what to expect, really, Michael, because as I say, I'd never written a poem before. It was the first poem I'd ever written. And like the replies I had back, the messages back off, obviously some miners who were actually there at the scene who were digging with their hands, obviously, and relatives of loved ones that they'd lost. And they loved it, the hearts and this, this type of thing popped up, and it made me feel humble, proud, obviously that I could give something back to the community, and that's how I felt after I'd written that poem.
As you think about your work, I know that you wrote cold poetry. What are some of the other predominant themes? When I started, obviously, the coal mining was there at the fore. Obviously, I wrote a lot about Victorian coal mining, where young children were used underground, the dangers. Then I progressed to the war poetry, World War I, World War II, predominantly World War I. And then I progressed to writing about anything, really, celebrities, a bit of politics, anything really that took my fancy. I'd see something on the telly or I'd read something in the paper, and then it would just trigger my mind off, I'll write a poem about that. And when I write these poems, I don't make any notes as such. I knew about Aberfan because I was only 16 years of age when it happened, I knew my father was a collier, so in our house when it happened, it was a black day. That day was, and for weeks after, every village in Wales was sort of overcome with grief. So many young children lost, obviously. So, what I mean? I write about anything. I published three books. Obviously, the coal mining and industry now lost, because as you can appreciate, there are no coal mines in Wales at all in Great Britain, actually. Then obviously the World War One poems, Poems for a Lost Generation. And then I did 50 Famous People, which I put on my group, and I asked the members who they'd like me to write about. And obviously I picked the top 50 out, the celebrities, singers, Elvis Presley, that type of thing, you know what I mean? Some Welsh actors, actresses, Muhammad Ali's in there, you know, great people, you know. So I predominantly write about anything.
Did you include Tom Jones?
Yeah, Tom is in there.
Okay.
Yeah, Tom the voice, he's in there. Would you like to listen to Tom's poem?
Yes, I'd love it.
Okay. Well, as you know, Tom Jones. Let me just find him. The Voice. I called him The Voice. As you know, he's 8 years of age now, Tom, and spent a lot of time in America. Resurrected Elvis's career, as you know.
Yes.
So this is Tom Jones. I've titled it The Voice. He was a collier's son, destined to sing. Even today, he's regaled as the king. It's not unusual, would bring him fame. Thomas Woodward, his certified name. From humble beginnings, playing the pubs, finally graduating to work in men's clubs, fronting the senators with soul in his voice, that night in Cum Tireri, an ultimate choice. Top Hat was the venue, a life changer for Tom. From that night forward, a superstar was born. Gordon Mills spotted his talent and made him an offer. Come up to the smoke, you've got to go solo. The 60s was swinging, an offer so tempting. Tom Jones he became, adoration never relenting. His baritone voice, full-throated, robust, 6 generations on, he leaves wannabes in his dust. Music was his passion, American soul and blues, putting Elvis in the shade, gradually filling his shoes. Las Vegas was called the strip he would ring, a boy from the valleys, now a super.
Arthur, the call dropped. So Arthur is not with us at this moment. Things happen when you're on the air. So what I'd like us to do is to listen to some music, and we'll be back. Michael Anthony Ingram. Welcome to the program. Arthur is here too. So let's bring Arthur back on.
Hello, Michael.
Hello, Arthur.
I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened, but we lost the connection somewhere.
Yes, we did. But you're back now, and everything is great.
Thanks
well,
very
I
much
didn't get
indeed.
to hear we didn't get to hear the end of the Tom Jones poem, but that was a great poem. I mean, you really went into detail about his life.
Yes. Well, what I basically do, Michael, especially if I'm doing an individual, I'll read up on them, obviously, get the info, the bio, and then I got it all in my head, and then I get the first couple of lines off, and then it just flows from there. You know what I mean? And I get the right words in, and you know, with Tom Jones, as you know, he was a soul singer. American soul was his sort of blues and soul. That's what he liked. You know what I mean? And you got to get those in as well. You know.
Oh wow! Now, your writing is very precise. Does writing energize or exhaust you?
It energizes me.
Tell me more.
I'll get up in the morning. I open my computer. If I'm not writing chapters for my thrillers, I think I've written 3 poems now in 2 days. 4 poems actually about sportsmen, 3 Welsh rugby players, and Alex Higgins, the snooker player. Because I saw a program on Alex Higgins, so I thought, I'd write a poem about him, you know, this type of thing. So the writing comes easy to me, and like I say, I write every day. If I'm not writing poetry, I'm writing chapters for my thrillers, obviously. So I don't get bogged down, and like I say, I don't make any notes. I might make notes of dates and stuff like that, but once I research what I'm writing about, it just flows. I get the first couple of lines, and everything falls into place, if you understand me. And I keep it to about 5 verses. Sometimes it'll go further than that, but you know, it's usually about 5 verses. I'll write it straight off, and then basically what I will do then, I'll put the computer down, I'll have a cup of tea, and then I'll just go through it again and just tweak it, basically.
Please share another poem.
Yeah, well, I've written a couple of, obviously, American poems, because I'm very sort of Martin Luther King. I've written. I'll give you Martin Luther King. I think that will.
Yes, it's a beautiful piece. Yeah. I'd love for you to recite it as well. So it's a beautiful piece.
I will. Okay. So, as you know, he's a great man, a sad loss to the world. This poem I titled, I Had a Dream. Born into persecution, he was whipped as a child by a Bible-punching father, often reviled. I will make something of you, his father would roar. On becoming 15, those beatings no more. He became a man of God, his fellow brothers to serve, a civil rights leader with a following unreserved. He had a vision for mankind, a story to behold, an orator of peace, later extolled. Non-violence was his rhetoric, equality his goal. Despair and segregation was branded on his soul. Fighting for his people who become mere dross, undervalued by a nation who showed little remorse. Degraded on buses, stand up for the whites, and lawful to sit. Jim Crow stole their rights. When Rosa Parks was arrested, he took up the fight. The Montgomery boycott, erasing their plight. Now treated as equals, it was his finest hour. Catapulted to fame, now wielding much power. He galvanized the South with speeches profound, detested by Hoover, subterfuge would abound. As a peace-loving man, he campaigned against war. He was anti-Vietnam, bloodletting aboard. Young black men sacrificed to free the oppressed, whilst in the land of the free, hate their bequest. He was an enemy of the state, of that there's no doubt. A controversial black man who they could do without. Death threats ignored, God's will he would preach. Peaceful protestation he eternally beseeched. On a hot Memphis night, his life was cut short, gunned down by James Ray without a fault. His death had caused riots all over the nation, black youth rebelling, such a grave situation. He was a man with a dream to unite the nation. Generations still follow, a true inspiration. The land of the free should bow in shame, whilst Martin Luther King is still shrouded in fame. And that I dedicate it to Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
That is so powerful. And it really touched me. It really touched me. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
My pleasure, Michael.
Do you think that someone who's a poet, if they don't feel strong emotions?
No, I think you've got to have emotion, Michael. Where you get these emotions from, I have no idea really. I think we're all born with emotion, personally, and it's like when people say, "I don't believe in God," and I say to these people, and throughout my career, I say, "Well, I am sure when your child is sick, or one of your relatives is sick or gravely ill, I have no doubt you do look up and pray to God." So that's my sort of take on emotion and belief.
All right. Do you come from a literary background?
No, not at all. My father, as I told you, was a coal miner. My mother, during the war, used to work in a munitions factory. I'm from a coal mining village. I'm one of 6 children. We've all got on great, but that was the way we were brought up. We didn't have much. Things were at a premium during the 50s and the 60s. But no, there was no sort of literature in the house. I can't even remember my parents sort of reading to us, to be honest with you, because they didn't really have to, because the primary school that I went to, it was 3 hours then, reading, writing and arithmetic. So you were reading all the time, basically. My father was working, obviously, so he's bed to work, my father was, and my mother was bringing 6 children up, so she didn't really have the time to go into the writing aspect of it with us.
All great writers have great writing influences. Who are some of yours, and what makes them great in your eyes?
Well, obviously, the first gentleman who influenced me was Mr. David John. Sadly, he's passed away. But obviously, I dedicated my first book to him because obviously he sparked this poetry journey. Even though I didn't take it up until I was very, very late in my life. But certainly, if Mr. John hadn't come to the school and sort of showed English lit as it should be, obviously I wouldn't be where I am today with the writing. And like I say, he introduced us to the war poets, Wilfred Owen and people like that, and I was very interested in those. So Owen is another one influence, and I don't actually read poetry, Michael. I don't read other people's poetry. The only poetry I actually read, I admin a poetry site, and obviously I've got to read the poems before I authorize them for the Facebook, obviously. So that's the only poetry that I actually read, because I don't want to be actually influenced by other poets, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
I've got my own sort of style, and I don't want anything to deviate me off that style. My poetry is very, very authentic, and that's the way I like to write. You know, it's my poetry is storytelling, authentic. It's like Martin Luther King. It's basically an 8-verse story of Martin Luther's life, basically. Only it's pacey down, obviously, and that's what I like. And I try to hook people with it. And people who read my poetry say we can understand it, and I think that's very important in poetry. I think the readers have got to understand what you're writing about, and I like to think that I do that with my poetry.
Please share another poem.
Okay, I'll give you I'll do one here from the war. This poem is entitled War Horse. And as you know, during the First World War, thousands upon thousands of horses were taken off the farms and shipped over to France. And this is the story of War Horse. I remember it well yesterday. My master cried, but he had to obey. Uniformed men, they stole me that day. My future now destined, a land far away. Down to the port with thousands like me, winched on a ship, our fate, history. We landed in France, not knowing our worth, paddocked together, no peace on earth. Shell blasts I heard, far away in the distance, all new to me, the night sky had glistened. That is the night death hit home to me, a war horse my fate. That's how it would be. The following day, a task I was given, pulling a gun. It was so unforgiving. Mile after mile, slowly untiring, shells bursting overhead, brave men lay dying. Once at the front, harness undone, back down the line, the hero unsung. Fed and watered, I lay down to rest. A far foreign field would be my bequest. 4 years I toiled, carnage abounding, pulling the cannon, gunfire resounding. I lost many friends to gash and shell, death commonplace, the vision of hell. Peace came at last, it had taken its toll, horses and men, many lost souls, the stench of death with me forever, brave men and horse in heaven together. We played our part in that abhorrent war, while enemy soldiers spilled each other's gore. I was taken by men to follow this course. Home I am now, a strong, proud war horse. And I dedicated that to the horses in the First World War, Michael.
Oh, I did not know that horses were shipped to France. I love documentaries and stories about World War I and World War II. I did not know that.
Yes, thousands were shipped. The farmers especially, they'd be there one day with the horses, and the army would come and say, we want those horses, and they just took them, basically. A lot of them never returned. I did that through the eyes of a war horse who returned to Britain, obviously.
Yes. Wow.
And what I like to do with my poetry, if I'm writing about an individual, especially a soldier, I'd like to put myself in the shoes of that soldier and how we fought, you know. Like I did one shot at dawn, where a young soldier is in front of the firing squad. I don't know if you want to hear that one.
I'd love to. I was going to ask, please.
Yeah. Okay. I wrote this one through the eyes of a 16-year-old boy who went to war thinking it would be over in a few months. He ended up on the Western Front where he watched carnage unfold. And this is his story. Shot at dawn. I was only 16 when I answered the call. Liberty to fight for. Whilst giving my all. It would be over in months, that's what they said. Like lambs to slaughter, brave men were led. The Western Front beckoned, I couldn't wait. With rifle and bayonet, not knowing my fate. Fighting was vicious, with no quarter given. Slaughter unfolding, unhinging the living. Day after day I saw brave comrades dying. My mind in turmoil, sobbing and crying. Back in the trenches, my whole body shook. With eyes closed I prayed. Sleep I forsook. Dawn it was breaking. I couldn't take any more. Under cover of darkness, I left an ungodly war. In a barn I took refuge. Daytime nightmares. Bodies and carnage I could see everywhere. My freedom short-lived, arrested and shackled. No solace given. For a mind not embattled. Court-martialed I was, sentenced to death. In 24 hours I would draw my last breath. I was left with no hope, blindfolded at dawn. In this war of all wars, we were just mere pawns. I wasn't a coward. My mind had been addled. I was a victim of slaughter I'd witnessed in battle. I didn't feel shame. It was no fault of my own. In my broken mind, I had no need to atone. I went to my Maker, my soul now cleansed. The casualty of war I could not comprehend. And that's the end of that Shot at Dawn poem.
You're extremely talented. What do you hope that readers get from encountering your poems?
I like to think they get sort of what I'm writing about. Like I say, the futility of war, the agony of coal mining, how miners were treated underground in the Victorian times, how many children were lost during the war, during the mines, that type of thing. I like to hook them to the poem. And what I find is with the poetry, it goes all over the world now, the poems do, and you get people getting in contact with it. Will you write a poem for me for Anzac Day? Will you write a poem for the Shot at Dawn people? Those are the soldiers who were shot at dawn during the First World War. But 300 were recently pardoned, a couple of years ago were pardoned. They weren't cowards, they were suffering from shell shock or post-traumatic stress as would be today.
Yes.
So I just like to open people's minds, and people have said to me, well, I never knew that, I never knew that happened. I said, well, as long as the poem can sort of hit home to you and make you think and perhaps research, especially younger people, in schools, that type of thing, you know what I mean?
Wow, Arthur. Amazing. Amazing. Let's take a brief break and we'll be right back. am Michael Anthony Ingram. We're here with Arthur Cole, the fantastic Arthur Cole. Now, to you, Arthur, what are some of the most prevalent ingredients that go into this concoction we call a poem? How is it constructed? What goes into it?
Obviously, the first thing is the subject matter. I think my poetry is off it. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm very friendly with a lady poet who lives on Rathlin Island, which is an island just off the tip of Northern Ireland. She's a poet. She's a romantic poet, Mary is. And I converse with her over the internet. And she kept telling me about Rathlin Island. So I said, well, I'll write you a poem about Rathlin Island, Mary. So once I finished with her, I researched it. It's an island where there are numerous shipwrecks off the coast. It's a bird sanctuary, it's an animal sanctuary with seals. They've got the whole gambit there. You know what I mean? It's a beautiful, beautiful island. So I researched it. I wrote the poem. It didn't take me long, half an hour perhaps, and I sent it to her. I didn't hear from her for a few days, and then she got in touch with me. She said, Arthur, I loved your poem, she said. My eldest daughter read it, and she asked if you'd ever been to Rathlin Island. And I told her, no, the man lives in Wales. And her words were, how can a person who's never been here write that? Because Mary said, that's our island. So I try to do that with my poetry. I try to bring it to life and to make it authentic. In fact, Mary gave me that handle, and I said, what does that mean? She said, you tell stories in poems. Yes.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, and she said, you know, people can understand them. You know, it's as if you're there. It's as if you've been there.
Yes.
And like my daughter said, how can a man write that if he's never been here? So
how do you think you're able to do it? How are you able to do it?
I have no idea. I don't know whether it was my police background. I was a detective for 27 years, and obviously I've interviewed all sorts of people, victims of all sorts of crime. I've dealt with every crime imaginable. And I don't know whether it's when I've been interviewing victims and defendants, that type of where my mind has just sponged emotions up and what people are thinking up. Do you understand me?
Yes.
And I think it's all been dormant there for like 40 years or 50 years. And then, like I said, when I wrote the Aberfan poem, it's as if it's like unlocked a safe.
Wow.
And all this stuff is in there. I don't know. I can't explain it, Michael, because I don't know where it comes from. People I've known for all my life have said, I didn't know you wrote poetry. I didn't know you wrote novels. I didn't know. I said, well, I didn't till 6 years ago. You know, if you'd said to me 6 years ago, you'd have 3 poetry books published, you'd have 9 thrillers, and you've got 3 in the pipeline. I go, you must be having a joke, are you or what? You know, but I don't know where it's come from. I don't know whether other poets are like that. I don't know, but I don't know what it is, Michael. To be honest, I can't really answer that.
All right. Do you think you discovered it reemerged in you, poetry? Do you think you were meant to be a poet?
No, I don't think so, Michael, to be honest with you, because I go back to the trigger, which was Aberfan. You know what I mean? If I hadn't written Aberfan, I wouldn't be talking to you tonight or this afternoon. There's no doubt about that. You know, it triggered me off, and I've been on the roller coaster ever since, if that can describe it. You know, I haven't got off.
Wow. I really enjoy talking to you. I just want to throw that in.
I'm still on this roller coaster, and I don't know when it's going to stop. If it will ever stop, I don't know.
Wow. When you write, do you sit and think through every word of every stanza, or do you write freely and allow the words to flow?
Well, like I say, I do a lot of research, reading, obviously, off the internet. Basically, I don't read books. I don't even read crime thrillers. I write crime thrillers, but I never read crime thrillers, and I do the same with that. Why read crime thrillers when you're writing them yourself? You know? And basically what I'll do, it's like the Tom Jones poem. I research it, and I know exactly what I'm going to do for the first couple of lines. And I'll sit down in my chair here. I got the telly on. I'll open my computer. I go to Word, and I get the first 2 lines down, and then it just flows out, because I've got all these adjectives and quotes in my head. I don't make any notes. They're just there, you know, and I do the 4 or 5 verses or the 6 verses, and I have a blow, and then I go back, and perhaps I tinker with it then, but it won't be for long. It'll only be for about 10 minutes until I'm happy with the poem. And then I just ping it and put it on the sites, you know. So that's basically that concept.
That's what you do?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I write by in my chair watching telly.
We've had another break in the system, but you know what we always do? We roll with the punches and we keep on going. I'm going to play some music again. Hopefully Arthur will be back and we can continue this poetic journey. We are back and Arthur is here. Let me bring him on. Arthur.
How are you, Michael? I'm back.
Hello. I'm glad you returned. There's more to do. Okay. Would you read another poem for us, please? Arthur, are you with me? Arthur is here. Arthur?
How are you, Michael?
Hello, my friend.
I think
I don't know what's happening either.
No,
but it didn't stop us, though. It didn't stop us.
No.
It's like a Timex. We took a licking and kept on ticking.
Yeah.
Share another poem before we go.
Yes, there's a story behind this one, and it's another disaster in a mine. It's called Brave Men of Glyshon. The Towie meandering swiftly with ease, evergreens rustling in a light breeze, birds sweetly singing way up on high, Killabibech not knowing brave men would die. 7 men drifted 90 meters below, routine blasting the way it should go. At 9:21, all went tragically wrong. A torrent of water released on the throng. The volume of water, a dam being breached. 3 of the 7, the entrance they reached. Rescue was hampered, divers sent down. The following day, all 4 souls found drowned. A tragedy the worst for decades. United a village, those hard times ahead. Hearts broken in pieces on that fateful day. Love and support, the Welsh mining way. The Towie still flowing not far from the mine. Killabibech will mourn with love so divine. Lest we forget brave souls that we lost. Mining for coal comes at a great cost. That's in memory of the 4 brave miners who lost their lives on the morning of 15th of September 2011 at the Glyshon Drift Mine, Killabibech, West Wales.
Wow.
That I wrote that and I put it on a coal mining site that I'm on, and within 5 minutes my phone beeped. It was a messenger, the Facebook messenger thing, and it was off a fella called Nigel Williams, and he said, "Mr. Cole, I've just read your poem." He said, "It's absolutely brilliant." Well, I said, "Thank you very much, Nigel." He said, "I should know." He said, "I was one of the survivors."
Oh, wow.
So I had to think twice. I thought, hang on a minute now, is this genuine or not? So I go back on the site and I put his name, and up he comes. He's a butcher now in the village where the drift mine was. So I go back in touch with him. I said, look, Nigel, I'll take the poem off. Obviously, I don't upset anybody, your family. He said, "No, please leave it on there and see, can I have the poem?" I said, "Of course you can. It's yours." I said, "The poem is yours." And he said, "I'm going to have it all framed up for my grandchildren." And then he said to me, "Have you listened to the Poet Laureate's poem about Glyshon?" I said, "No, Nigel, I don't listen or read poetry." I said, he said, "Will you please listen to it?" So I did. I listened to it, and I couldn't understand it.
Okay.
So I rang him back, and I said, "I can't." He said, "I couldn't either." He said, "You a poem." I read it, I shut my eyes, and I was back in the pit, in the mine, he said. And I think that's what I tried to get out of my poetry, basically.
Mm-hmm. So much is happening in the world today. So much. The pandemic plus protests plus you name it. What do you think is the role of a poet in modern-day society? Well, I certainly think, I'm speaking about my own poetry. Obviously, I don't know what other poets would think, but certainly out of my poetry, I like to think that, like, somebody will come home from work who's on my group or whatever, have their tea, and think, I see what Arthur's putting on the group tonight. And they'll go to the group and they'll read a poem and they'll leave me a message, this type of thing, perhaps it'll break their day up. Because as you say, everything is in turmoil at the minute, and I think poets have got a big role to play in,
they go on about people's mental health and stuff.
Yes. So true.
I try to encourage people to write. I say, don't be afraid to write. I've had many people get in touch with me. I don't like to share my poems. I say, no, start a group, start a page, whack your poems on there, get people to read them, invite your friends on there, this type of thing, and it will give you resolve. It will clear your mind, and you'll take your mind off other things as well. You know what I mean? That's how I see. That's how I see poetry this day and age.
The very last question for you, Arthur, and we'll close. Does knowing that your poems are published, you've got 3 books, plus other outlets, and out there in the world, validate you being a poet, or are you content knowing they're out of your system?
I never got into poetry to be published, Michael. That's the first thing I'd like to say. I didn't write. I was lucky to get a publisher, and it came through the poems, obviously, especially the coal mining poetry. But a publisher got in touch with me, said, I'd like to do your poems. I said, well, fair enough, and then he asked about the books. And but you know what I mean? It's not the be-all and end-all to be published, and it doesn't give me any sort of kudos that I am a published poet and an author. As long as people enjoy what I'm writing, I'm quite happy. The next 3 thrillers that I'm writing with Nigel, they've been finished. We will self-publish them ourselves on Amazon. Because what I have found in the 5 years with a publisher, you haven't got a lot of control on when the books are coming out, and everything else that goes along with the publisher. Whereas when you self-publish, you've got more control. You can tell your audience there's a new book coming out in June, that type of thing. I'm not a big publisher lover, to be honest with you, if I'm going to be truthful with you, Michael. I prefer now to go down the self-publishing route and just carry on with the type of poetry I write and the type of thrillers that we write. And it's like going from one box to another box, but nothing's changed.
I could talk to you all day, all evening, share stories about poetry, about life, but we've come to the end of the program. I want to thank you, Arthur, for such a wonderful interview. I wish you nothing but the best. Continued success. I really enjoy your work.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for inviting me onto your program, and give all our best to our friends over the pond, as they say.
Yes. All right. And to everyone, take care. And as I state every week, let poetry ring.
You have just listened to the Quintessential Listening Poetry Online Radio Podcast with your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher. And make sure to catch our next episode.